Great. So now let us introduce today's speaker, and that is Rafael Ferreira Melo, who's a professor at the Federal Rural University of Pernambuco in Recife, Brazil. And he's a senior researcher at CSER, where he coordinates the master and PhD programs. He has a doctoral degree in computer science with research interests that span across learning analytics, generative AI, and natural language processing. In the last few years, he has supported the adoption of learning analytics tools in several Brazilian institutions. And on a national level, he led 2 projects funded by the Brazilian Ministry of Education, aiming the development of natural language processing and learning analytics techniques to enhance student written productions, and learning analytics dashboard that support decision-making regarding the national education plan. He's also very well connected internationally and has worked on several multinational research projects with partners in Europe, Australia, and Latin America. Today, he will explore the critical barriers that limit the widespread implementation of learning analytics, including issues related to infrastructure, access to technology, and digital literacy. But he will also show how solving these challenges can foster more equitable access to data-driven insights and improve educational outcomes in under-resourced contexts. So Rafael, thank you for being here and sharing your research with us. And I will now give the floor to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Just okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, looking good.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for the very kind introduction. Today I'll be addressing this topic. Initially, Joanna asked me to talk about NLP for Portuguese, which will be much easier for me, to be honest, to talk about, because I've been working on this topic for a while now. But my main interest in nowadays is how to actually adopt learning analytics in practice, but with the restrictions that we have in Global South, and especially for me in Brazil. So I'll be talking about one of the projects that Joanna mentioned that we have with the Ministry of Education, and how we addressed some design problems within the flow of the learning analytics process. So I would like to start giving some contextualization and diagnosis of the problem to make sure that you understand why the reality of Brazil in many times is different from other realities. First of all, a brief picture of the learning gap in Brazil. This is the PISA results for 2018. And as you can see, Brazil is not well ranked. And it was ranked in 66th position. So we are not doing that good. And last year, in 2022, we had the most recent results, and we increased a few positions, still not that good, but we decreased the score. So we basically we gained 6 positions, but not because we improved, but during the pandemic, probably many countries reduced the scores. So we are basically a little bit less, we decreased, I think, 3 points here in terms of the final score. So we have this understanding that we need to improve in many aspects. And although Brazil is much richer than many of the countries in this list, we have a lot of diversity, and it makes it hard for us to address this kind of problem within the whole country. I have more data on that. So during the pandemic, we even, the period was worse for us. So this is some data that we have from the national government. They did some research, and they found out that we even decreased some skills during the pandemic. And finally, we have this national test for K-12 kids. And again, during the pandemic, we were growing very slowly over the years, but during the pandemic, we had this decreased again. So bottom line of this first part is Brazil is a diverse country, and it's hard to address learning gaps for different contexts, for different schools, for different students all over the country. And by the way, this test is from 0 to 100, so we are pretty much not doing good. Second point of the context is related to internet connection, equipment available in schools, and teachers' digital literacy. So first of all, this graph is very nice for me because it shows, I will just give a brief overview of this. So the green points are schools. All of these points that are colored are schools, public schools in Brazil. These green ones are schools where students have access to internet for pedagogical reasons. And the red nodes, the red points are schools where they don't have internet at all. And you can see that Brazil has a big discrepancy between South, which is richer, and North and Northeast. We have many schools in North of Brazil that doesn't have any internet connection at all. Maybe just cell phone connections for some teachers, but not for schools, the whole schools. And by the way, just to make sure to mention everything in the context, this year the president launched a program that's supposed to provide internet connection for all the schools in Brazil in the next 4 years. So this reality may change, but this is the picture that we have right now. And also we did a very a small study analyzing data from the World Bank, and we project for different countries the access to the internet that they would have over the years. And the borderline here is that it would take more or less 100 years to fill the gap in terms of internet access between low and high income countries. So we are not expecting to have access to internet as richer countries would have. And so we need to think solutions, learning solutions differently for this type of country. On the other side, in terms of equipment, this is in the same study, we also evaluated access to cell phones, for instance. And we can see that even low-income countries and communities, nearly 90% of people already have access to cell phones. So this is why we make some decisions on that direction in the project that I will share with you in a few minutes. And finally, this is a study during the pandemic where the national government evaluated the proficiency of teachers in using remote teaching, like using online and technological tools to give the classes. And so 88% of teachers had never done anything online before the pandemic. I mean, teachers from public schools in Brazil. But the result is even stronger when we see this second line here, where it says that 84% of the teachers didn't feel ready to use technology and to use to move everything for the online environment. So it means that besides of the whole context that I mentioned in terms of internet and equipment, we also have this problem with teachers handling technology for public schools especially. which is something that we need to address as well. And just to finish this first part of the talk, I showed you a lot of data, but I also want to show you what is the reality. So this is a class in a public school in Brazil. So sometimes they don't even have electricity. So they need to move to open spaces where they have some lights so they can have classes. This is another classroom in Brazil in the middle of the river. So you can see that it's not just a problem of giving schools equipment and internet connection, because they have many other problems. And finally, another school in North, where they have classes above the river, but sometimes when there is a lot of rain, they cannot go to the classrooms because it's flooded. So data tells us a lot of things, but the reality, the real life, it's like this. Of course, in Brazil, we have many great public schools, especially in southeast of Brazil. But if we want to have something at the national level to reach all of the students that are enrolled in these schools, we need to think on solutions that can reach this type of scenario as well, and not only the scenarios where they have laptops and internet connection. And by the way, a few years ago, like a decade ago actually, the government created the program One Laptop per Student. So they actually shared and sent for the whole cohort of students in public schools a laptop. But after 1 or 2 years, when they started to break and everything, it was just left around. So it's hard in this scenario to think on a traditional way of solving problems. And it's not only about give them equipment and give them internet connection. We need to rethink some steps in the process to make them use the potential of AI and learn analytics. So having said that, I will jump in what I want to show you today, but basically I will try to address these questions about what aspects of Learn Analytics we can change or revise to better meet the students in these schools. And more specifically, I'll be talking about a project with the Minister of Education that we have, that we had actually, it already finished, and where we were trying to improve writing skills of students without improving the burden of the teachers. So we didn't want to give more tests for teachers, and considering the social inequities that I just showed you in the previous slides. So this was the main project that I was involved in a couple of years ago with the Minister of Education. And these were related to this learning recovery law that we had in 2022, so more or less in the end of the pandemic. So the national government developed this law to help students in public schools to try to recover the learning gap that they increased during the pandemic. And this project was focused on writing skills, but the whole law was targeting reading and math activities as well. So what we developed was a pipeline that we called unplugged artificial intelligence, but we already have some other aspects to discuss, but this was the proposal that we had at the moment. So basically, the students were writing essays in a piece of paper. I will show you the whole flow in a few minutes. And then the teachers could take a picture for their cell phones, because as I mentioned before, although they they don't have equipment like computers. 90% of the population already have access to cell phones. So we developed this app where we need only a camera with 6 megapixels to take the picture of the essay. And then it goes through this AI process. And by the way, sometimes teachers needed to go to the secretary of the municipality. So we have, for each municipality in Brazil, they have a secretary of education. And in some schools, they didn't have internet connection, neither like the Wi-Fi, but also they didn't have the 5G connection. So they needed to go to the secretary to get the internet and then to upload the pictures that they took. And then we have this computer vision process to extract the text, and then NLP process to do the essay scoring process, and then we have the feedback. So we basically changed a lot on this initial part and also in the way that we provide the feedback for teachers. I will show you what we did now. So starting with the sheet that we developed, we tried different types of sheets, but although OCR is very, like, it's almost a solved problem in many contexts, we are handling manuscript for students in public schools in Brazil, which in many cases they are starting to learn how to write. And we needed to develop this sheet that has these different gray lines because it would help us with the processing of the whole essay and extraction of the text. If we use regular lines, many times we see that this mixed with the students' writing. So that's why we developed this sheet. So since from the beginning, even the sheet that they were using to write the essays needed to be developed differently from what they were doing before that. And then we have this app where teachers can take pictures from these essays. Just a few minutes. So this is a essay production, and teachers take the picture, and they can set the margins of the picture, and then it will be recorded in the cell phone. And when the cell phone gets some internet connection, they will transfer it for the server. And we start with computer vision process. I won't go into details about this NLP and computer vision process. I can go and I can answer questions about that, but the whole point of this presentation is the whole process and not specific models. So we have these two directions that the image can go when they reach the server. One is identify these possible errors. So you can see here some of these errors. So believe or not, but some teachers take pictures of empty sheets and send these to the server. And sometimes they don't use the sheet as we suggested. So they have this type of writing going down in the pictures. So if we receive one of these pictures with these errors, the system blocks it and says not appropriated to go for the next steps. And then we have the whole pipeline of computer vision. We identify the margin of the paper, and then the QR code which contains information, and then the specific area of what students should be writing, and then identify words. And then based on these words, we extract the text, and then we reorder the text to be in the right order. So if you know Portuguese, you'll see that this sentence is not completely right, but I will show you that they are right enough to get good results in our final system, and we managed to reach what we wanted to reach. And this is some production, real life productions. And it will be amazing to have productions like this. But in reality, we have a lot of pictures like this. So it's a lot of things that we need to improve in the app to avoid this type of images. And we also have images like this where the teacher have like taken the picture with the wrong illumination and orientation. I will show you what we are doing right now. But among like 10 to 15% of the pictures that we received had one of these problems, because this is a real world application, right? So we need to handle these problems. And then we develop a data set for computer vision. As I mentioned before, I included all of this information in the slides, so I can share with you later. But it's not the aim of this talk to go into the details of the models. So we did the binarization, we evaluated 32 algorithms, and in the end, the D-link net was the best one in our case. And then we had the word segmentation. As you can see, our final results were quite nice, 94% of F score. But basically, this after the binarization, we had this like segmenting words. And then our final OCR process, we reached error rate of less than 30%. We evaluated also with Google Vision at the time. And by the way, this project finished in 2022. So it was Google models that they have at the time. And their models reached 50% of error. So we had much better results. And as I mentioned before, our results were better because we trained our model in the data set with the specific characteristics. And sometimes Google models try to fix words. We have this issue, right? Because when you are converting image from essays to the transcribed text, we cannot fix words because the students may have written wrongly initially. So Google models, sometimes they have post-processing steps that fix some words. So it also had an impact on the final outcome. And then the natural language processing steps, we have, again, we have 3 conditions where the system just finish and send it back to teachers. If the students copy and paste from the instruction, because they got the instruction for each of the essay production, we just finish the process and say, teachers, they are just copy and pasting. If there are many unknown words, so if the system extract many, like 50% or 60% of the words are unknown words for Portuguese, we also don't process this essay. And if it's off topic, so if they copy for instruction, but if they are completely off topic, these instructions, we finish the process and we send this feedback for teachers. And we were working with narrative texts and evaluating these 4 competencies, like formal written, it goes for grammar mistakes, and then thematic coherence, it goes for how aligned with the topic they say is, and narrative rhetorical structures, because in Portuguese we have specific elements that should be in narrative texts. And then cohesion. These were the 4 things that we analyzed in the essays. Again, I won't go into details, but in the end, it's kind of present a little bit about our work with NLP for Portuguese. I have some results here just to show you the feeling of the results, but I also included the papers that we published. For formal written, we used we extract some elements from the texts, and for each one of these elements, we have binary like scores. 0, 1, and then this is what feeds the classifier. And by the way, I forgot to mention that for each one of these competencies that we are evaluating, the students can be in level 1 to 5. So we don't have like regular scores, we just have 5 categories. That means what type of error the students are doing. So this is for formal written, and then for thematic coherence, we use many well-known tools for people doing NLP, including Cometrics for Portuguese. And then we feed the classifiers, and we have this level from 1 to 5 again. And yeah, it's published as well. We have narrative rhetorical structure. In this, these are the categories that we need to evaluate. These are the elements. So in this case, we are extracting these elements using name entity recognition on one side and classifiers on the other side. And then based on the number of elements that the students are including and the order of these elements, because the rhetorical structures also consider the order, we have the final level of the students. So this was the last paper published that we had last July. And then finally, we have the cohesion. This is a submission the review. Again, I won't go into details because it will take a while, but we are using this more sophisticated process to classify for cohesion, but it's mainly based on all of these features that are well used for NLP research. This paper is currently under review, but this is also a PhD thesis of a student who will finish in next month, so I can share results from his thesis as well. But in the end, the kappa was 0.43. So it was good enough for us. And then, so I showed you every step of the way, but I think the main point here is to evaluate the whole process. And to do that, we had this coding process where we collected 1,000 and almost a little bit more than 1,200 essays for this. And for each one of these essays, we had 2 teachers evaluating these essays for different competencies. And we call this annotator A and B. It could be teacher A and B as well. And in case of disagreement, we had a third, more experienced teacher, but they decided together. So we created this committee of the 2 initial teachers with this third one, and they decided which should be the final score for that specific competence for that students. And in the Brazilian system, we have many national level tests. And basically the government, they have like this scheme where, of course, if the 2 teachers give the same score, it's fine for the government. But also they have this neighborhood matching. So if 2 teachers give a score that is only 1 level different, in this case, like if one scored 1 and the second scored 2, or 3 and 2, it considered correct, and the government chose the higher number for the final score. So we evaluated in both cases our approach, and what we had in the end is that the AI system, the whole process, computer vision and NLP, when we compare with the human committee that was created in the last phase, these are kappa values. Okay, so we had better agreement between the AI system we developed and the human committee than the two teachers that coded the data set initially. So these are the values, and as you can see, when we have this neighborhood matching, it's the kappa values goes almost to 100 in every case. So that's why we think this is good enough to use in practice. And by the way, we have the data set, it's available. you can download and you can use it. And finally, the last step, I will try to finish in a few minutes so we have time for questions. But as I mentioned before, teachers didn't have internet connection, so we could not plan a whole dashboard with interactions and different visualizations. We needed to plan a dashboard that could be printable. So we have this individual student dashboard where it says the level of performance of this student for each one of the competencies, and we also have what they are doing good and what they need to improve. Okay, and in this part, it's just saying different types of errors that wouldn't allow us to correct these specific essays. And this first one means the essay is fine to be analyzed. So we have this dashboard for students, individual students, and also the compilation for the classes. So instead of have the scores, we have the percentage of students in specific scores. And we also have here like essays with not enough text, and essays with a lot of words that are not Portuguese words, so they were not, they haven't went through the correction process. And believe me, some of these, of course, we generate a PDF of these dashboards. Many teachers access this through the app, but also many teachers needed to go to this Secretary of Education, the municipality, to get printed versions. So they actually printed to give it to some teachers. So this is a different perspective on what we should include in dashboards or reports that make sense to print them and give them to teachers. And by the way, this solution, we target teachers, not students, because as we had many layers of AI processing, we think that it may have some errors if we give them the results direct for students. So we are targeting teachers, and based on that, teachers readapt what their class is planning. So they can target specific mistakes that their students in their class are having. And just to finish, we have this tracking. So we managed to track how students progress over time. And what we did at the national level in the end was the Brazilian government, they have this process where the students have this is a formative process, but what happens is students in public schools, they write these essays, and sometimes we send them to universities to be scored by teachers at the universities, and then they send back to the students, but this process takes months. And what we did was to include our app in the middle of this process, and now the teachers from these public schools could have this diagnosis from the students in more or less 2 or 3 days. So it takes a lot. I think I have this number. Yeah. It takes a lot. Let me just go to this. Okay, no, I haven't included, but the numbers in total, I think we had 1 million pictures that were taken, more or less 1 million over the project, the whole project duration. And these are the demographics of students the students from public schools the teachers use this app. And we can see that Northeast was one of the regions that use it the most. And Northeast is one of the regions that has a lot of problems with internet connection. And then we also have these graphs where we can understand how different genders or different school areas are progressing over time. And I forgot to mention that we had 4 cycles of these essays application. So we had like students had one essay to write, and then we made the diagnosis, and then the teacher improve their classes based on that. and then we have the second cycle with another essay, and it went for 4 cycles in our project. The app is still available, so schools can continue to use, but we are not tracking this anymore because now it's with the Ministry of Education. And just to finish my presentation, so we can open discussion with some future/current works, because the project finished in 2022, so we already have some things on place. And I recently was awarded with a Google Research grant. This is basically our new app now, which is simple for teachers to use, because when we had this project with the Ministry of Education, they had many requirements, and now it's much simple for students. And within this project, we are evaluating the new language models from Google, and we will incorporate the methodology teaching at the right level. I don't know if you are familiarized, but basically, based on this diagnosis, we divided students into groups of students with similar errors, and then we have specific content from them. And finally, we will apply it again with some schools in Pernambuco, which is the state where I'm based. So I think that will be this for the presentation. And now I'm open for questions and discussions.
Thank you so much, Rafael, for such a great presentation and insights from Brazil. It's a lot of work and a very big project, so very exciting work, and it's very good to see a lot of work done, especially in the Global South as the talk states. And I think this is a good motivation possibly for people working in these contexts on how to work with such tools and make them applicable and usable in the context. So for the audience, feel free to put your questions in the chat, but you can also open your mic and ask your questions. Catherine, you have a question. Maybe feel free to unmute and ask your question to Rafael.
Sure. Hi, Raphael. Great presentation. Thanks for sharing your work. My question is just that I'm wondering whether you've considered sharing the results via the app, because so many teachers are using the app. It seems like it might be a two-way rather than just a one-way communication mechanism.
Yes, we actually have this dashboard that I showed. They are also available in the app. But they can also receive by mail and printed. But there is one restriction, that we didn't want to include many sophisticated things in the app, because we wanted to make it work in equipment that are not that recent, let's say. So as I mentioned, we just need a camera with 6 megapixels. And if we include a lot of things in the app, it would increase the processing that we would need for the cell phone, and also the memory that it consumes. So these were the issues, but the teachers could access this dashboard through the app as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And actually, just one thing to complement, the Ministry of Education, they had a dashboard, the interactive dashboard. So it was possible to create because we have the data, right? So we can create these dashboards, but it was just the way to reach teachers, that we didn't want to exclude some of them. So this is the way.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that clarification. And I think, Rafael, I have maybe a complementary question about the topic of applying learning analytics and technology in general, especially in the Global South. I think we did some research with Paul Prinsloo at some point on the learning analytics in the Global South, at least on the African continent. And one of the things we realized were related to, learning analytics, usually we say to get data, you have some kind of a system to collect this kind of data. And we looked at things like learning management systems being in place. And the challenge was some of the institutions don't have these resources. And like you showed us even in Brazil, like some, at least in the I don't know whether that's the eastern part, I don't know which part you talked about, which may not have the similar resources just like other parts of the country. And when it comes to implementing such kind of systems, like you have a dashboard, you have a mobile phone, or have a mobile device, is it common that possibly all teachers, regardless of the area of the country, they actually have access to these devices? Do you see any challenges related to technology access that could actually impact the way these kind of resources actually used in the actual practice? Is this a problem at all? And have you experienced it in your study?
Yeah, in the beginning of this project, we did some analysis of data that were available, but also we interviewed teachers and school directors. And in the end, we found out that cell phones were fine for teachers, because initially we were considering to have students taking pictures. Because if you concentrate everything in the teacher, each teacher has like 30 students, 40 students, so they need to take a lot of pictures of these essays. So we considered to design it for students. But then we found out that in many schools, the students didn't have cell phones, but the teachers did. So at least in Brazil, of course, I wouldn't say 100%, but more than 90% of teachers would have access to cell phones. Some of them old cell phones, so this is why we decided to have the less number of implementation of algorithms within the cell phone. But in terms of internet connection, as I mentioned during the presentation, sometimes they needed to go to a specific place in the city to get this internet access, because they didn't have 5G, and they didn't have internet access in the school. So this is like type of some schools that I just showed you in both. They didn't have internet access.
Yeah.
But 19% of the teachers would have a cell phone and at least an internet connection that they could share the pictures with us.
That's interesting. I don't know whether Joanna want to. I think Tura also has a question, but I think Joanna's question is related a little bit to what I was asking. Do you want to ask that, Joanna?
Yeah, so I was thinking about the quality of the devices that teachers had in this case. So, and also how important the quality of the image is for the OCR. And if there is that, you need to kind of strike a balance between, okay, they take good quality images, but they are large in size and they still need to transfer it via the internet, versus, okay, the camera of the phone is not good enough, for example. So technical not issues, but limitations, let's say, for the software to be able to work, or the whole pipeline to be able to work.
Yeah, this is a very good question. And in terms of the device, we actually needed to set up, as I mentioned, we need a camera with 6 megapixels, and we needed to limit the upper bound of it. So even if you have a better camera, the picture would still be around 6. I think it's between 6 and 10 megapixels, because it's AI, right? So it learns from partners. So if you have a picture with 6 megapixels and another one with 50, let's say, the images will be too different from each other. So we needed to limit it in a range between 6 to 10. And then our models were able to extract. And we also solved this problem of sending the image, because they are small when you have this type of resolution. This is one thing. But the main problem for us is, this is what we are trying to fix in this new app, was the image that were not proper taken. Like as I showed you, like picture that are cutting the sheet or with the wrong illumination and everything. And we didn't have in the app algorithms to detect that. So basically the teachers took a picture, we send it to the server, and then when it reached the server, we see that it's not possible to process this picture. But right now in this new version, we have a few algorithms that already detect some common mistakes. And we already say for the teacher in real time that this picture is not good enough for the processing and you need to take another picture of this, say. So like this orientation, illumination, if it's cutting parts of the paper, or if the shadow is appearing in the picture, things like that. Now it's already in the app and we give them real-time feedback so they can take another picture.
All right. We have 8 minutes and we have 2 questions in the chat. Tura, I don't know whether you want to unmute and ask your question about the LMS before we go to Hassan. Yeah.
I could try to do that. I'm looking forward. I mean, you have presented a scenario that's been kind of building on the tools we have access to at the moment. But when we look forward, we could run large language models on the local phone without connectivity, providing that we are able to install that thing. Have you thought about that possibility and what kind of pedagogical scenarios and options that could open up?
That's a very good question. Before I answer that, I just wanted to mention that we are already evaluating GPT models for text extraction and to score, they say. So this part we are already covering. And we have some initial results published, but we also are working on more in that direction. And specifically to answer your question, we are closing a partnership with a company that they developed this. It's a telecommunication company in Brazil, and they developed this type of systems that goes between. I can try to get the specifications here later, but they developed these devices that creates a local network, and the whole of this partnership is the goal of this partnership is to embed LLMs in these devices and to create these local networks for teachers and students to access these LLMs. We don't want to embed them in cell phones not because it's not possible, because now it's possible, but it would require better cell phones. So if we start to embed more things in the cell phone, it would require better cell phones. But if we embed them in devices like this, where we can easily take them to the schools and the schools can access this network, it's easier. So we are right now discussing a partnership with a company in Brazil to do this type of work. But we are evaluating the performance of LLMs and other new models to solve our problems as well. We have tried OpenAI models, and now we have the grant to try Google models as well.
Great. Thanks for the response. Maybe we have 2 questions you can answer briefly, Hassan and Chao. Hassan, do you want to come first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Really insightful presentation and really interesting ideas. I was wondering if there is already a list of these recommendations or conclusions you have come to in terms of best practices of designing educational software or learning analytics approaches to address the inequality. You mentioned a couple of them. One of them, for example, the design of dashboards to be printable, not only interactive and so on. Were there such a list in one of the publications you highlighted, or is it planned?
Yeah, we have a publication. I can share it with you later on. But it's not like a list of recommendation. It's focused on the decisions that we make for this project and the reasoning behind it. But of course, we know that these are not the only ways to address this problem. So we would be very happy to collaborate with other people who want to try to track this problem differently. But we do have one publication explaining the reason behind each one of the decisions of this project that we have. And we did a literature review on the first part, which is the handwriting extraction for education. So it explains as well why we decided to have a specific paper with specific format, but not the dashboard part. The dashboard part, we just have the reasoning behind the decision we made in the project. So I'll be very happy to collaborate with other people who wants to study more about this perspective.
Yeah, Chao, briefly, your question? Maybe Muhammad last.
I think I'm not listening to you.
There's Chao has a question. Maybe we can't hear you. Can you speak again? No, we can't hear you. Yeah, but I can read out your question because we don't have time. So you asked, as many studies report both positive and negative impacts of learning analytics on teaching and learning, did you conduct any effectiveness evaluation to understand the real impacts? That's about the observation in your context. And then in addition to infrastructure, during the learning analytics adoption process, what are the difference between your findings and other findings in the literature that focused on Global North?
Yeah,
If you can answer that briefly. Yeah.
About the first questions, we experienced increase in learning gains, but we know that our technology is just one piece of the puzzle, because in the end, everything depends we target teachers, right? So we give them this formative feedback, and then they needed to change the courses, the classes, in order to target these specific mistakes that the students were doing. So it's up to the teacher. In this case, it's up to the teacher in the end. But we experienced some learning gains overall, and we also did we conducted some evaluation on the teacher experience in using the app. So this was also done, but it doesn't completely answer your question. So we haven't done a detailed evaluation on this first question. We have these two things. Learning gains were good, the increase in learning gains, and also the experience with teachers using the app was good as well. But to answer your question, we need more things to do. And in terms of the second question, I forgot to better connect in my presentation, but also I mentioned about the digital proficiency of teachers in like, it's hard for them to use technology in classes. So the way that we developed the app was considering this gap, and we try to create the app as simple as possible. We even considered to use WhatsApp for teachers, to take a picture and use WhatsApp to send the pictures for us, because it will be even simple for teachers to use WhatsApp because they are already using. So I think besides infrastructure, we also have this gap in teachers' digital literacy, like the way that they use technology. And if technology is not easy enough, probably they wouldn't use. So this is another thing to consider.
Yes, David, you had a comment about LMS. Do you want to say it as the last comment for the presentation today?
Hi, thanks a lot for the presentation. It was very interesting. Yeah, we've been using LLMs to try and assess certain parameters in transcripts. And what we have found is that if you run the same transcript through currently I'm using OpenAI GPT-4o. If you run the same transcript through the LLM, you have to be very careful because you can get different results maybe if you run it a few days apart. So we're starting to put a lot of attention onto the prompt to make sure that it's defined very precisely. And
yeah,
and especially for research purposes where we're going to need other people to validate the data. We want to be careful with this.
Yeah, you're completely right. I'm evaluating GPT also for like scoring of short answers, and I have been experienced this type of things as well. What we want to do is to use open source LLMs, so we would have the specific version that we are using on our servers. So it won't be continuously updated, but of course, everything depends on the prompt, everything depends on the version of the LLM. So that's why we are still using the machine learning models that we developed over the project.
Right. Yeah, we're using NLP to try and triangulate the data. So when you use a transcript, you've got hard data. So you've got learning interactions, which are true facts. Then NLP gives you a different source, and then the LLM gives a different source. And all 3 points should give you the same sort of result. You can't rely on one alone.
Sounds good. Thank you for sharing.
All right. Again, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody, because I think now we are running out of time. So many good questions, very good topics of discussion. And I think we can continue this discussion after the presentation. So first,